Welcome everyone. You are listening to the new episode of the Votes and Seats podcast series of the Center for Political Science at Matthias Corvinus Collegium. My name is Szabolcs Janik, senior researcher of the center. A scheduled Romanian legislative election was held on the 1st of December between, now we can say, the two planned rounds of the presidential election. I'm quite sure most of you have heard more about the latter in recent days, so it will be also addressed briefly in today's episode. However, we will rather focus on the parliamentary election. And I have the honor to welcome Mr. Titus Techera, who is a political scientist and currently works as an international program coordinator at the Edmund Burke Foundation, and who is also currently a visiting fellow at MCC. Dear Titus, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's quite rare that I have to speak on my native Romania's political affairs. Usually we're a reasonable, boring democracy where governments come and go. It's a little embarrassing, but typical. And on the other hand, we're a good NATO, EU member state, always trying to fit in, be less corrupt, be more productive economically, try to offer a future to a country that's been, after all, through this terrible communist tyranny, as you also in Hungary know. And so we're sort of like trying to be a good kid in school, but not this year. This year, unprecedented, shocking stuff has happened, and so I have to speak as a political scientist, but also as a Romanian citizen. It's quite worrisome stuff, and of course, it's now being discussed at European level, at global level in America as well. So, let's get to it.
Absolutely, I'm quite sure we will have a very excellent and interesting talk in the next 30-40 minutes. So, as I already mentioned, I think we should pay some words to the presidential election, our minor topic today. These days, everybody who is interested in Romanian politics, in international politics from other countries, commentators, politicians, analysts, are all talking about the Romanian presidential election, in particular about the decision of the Romanian Constitutional Court in which it annulled the result of the first round. Very generally speaking, what is happening now in Romanian politics? What do we know today, if we wish to stick to the facts? Why is Georgescu's campaign seen so problematic and even illegal in different aspects?
I think this is the major topic of interest. So far as I've seen, the press from Politico in America to various European publications in various languages. And it seems like we have to first get the facts straight and the timeline, because this is truly unprecedented stuff. It's this December, of course, is 35 years after December 89, the coming of democracy, the coming of free elections, political parties, and competition to represent popular opinion. And in 35 years, this has not happened. There were presidential elections on November 24, then legislative elections on December 1, and then there were supposed to be presidential elections again, a runoff, a second round of elections on December 8 to settle the presidential matter, since nobody won a majority outright. It's rare, only once every 20 years, that legislative and presidential elections happen simultaneously, and it's a bit surprising. 3 consecutive Sundays, the whole nation has to go out and vote. But that turned out to be the least of the surprises. The big surprise was that a political unknown, a guy without a party, without an organization, without big funding, without a big media push, Călin Georgescu, won the first round of balloting comfortably, almost 23% of the vote. And so this was a shock to the system. Every other party leader, starting with the prime minister, failed to even make the runoff. This is also unprecedented. And so it sent shocks through the system, and it created a response of a certain kind. The first real sign of the trouble came on December 4th, after the legislative elections, but before the second round of presidential elections, when the Supreme Council of National Defense, part of the Romanian deep state, made this, again, unprecedented statement that they are going to declassify documents that show that there is some kind of malign foreign interference in Romanian elections, vaguely gesturing at Russia and suggesting that the interference must have happened through TikTok. And on that basis, it would seem, on December 6th, the Constitutional Court, although it had previously refused to get involved, do something dramatic, now did something more than dramatic, again, unprecedented. It actually canceled the December 8 elections, which had already begun in the diaspora on December 6th. And it also annulled the first round of elections. And in short, it suspended the constitutional process until further notice. Romanians today do not know when there's going to be presidential elections. They do not know in what way they will be arranged. They do not know who will be running. In fact, we don't know anything. What we do know is that these state institutions that are beyond electoral control simply canceled elections. It's shocking. It's unprecedented. It's an attack by bureaucracy on popular representation through political parties and elections. So everybody's stunned. Nobody has any idea. What do you do now? It seems like the bureaucrats and the people at the top involved in this unprecedented stuff are also somewhat confused. For example, the outgoing president, Klaus Iohannis, decided that he is not in fact going out. He just told people he's going to stay as president until further notice. And then the Constitutional Court also made the public statement saying, yeah, he will stay in office. But this is unconstitutional. But it does not seem like the Constitution matters at this point. But also we don't know by what other rules are we playing the game then. So this is the ongoing drama. And over against this, the claim that there's been some kind of misinformation that helped the Georgescu campaign, that maybe he orchestrated it or some proxies did, seems to be very, very flimsy, because neither the Supreme Council of National Defense offered any evidence, nor has anybody else, nor have the numbers, so far as we have them, for the Georgescu TikTok campaigns, the associated hashtags, seemed special. He didn't have better numbers than other candidates. He didn't have very unusual behavior compared to other candidates. It's just that when people saw him, they voted, apparently. And when they saw these other people who had many more TikTok views, like the prime minister from the Social Democrat Party, they didn't vote. And but also the election itself, it just looks like an election. Since we do have the numbers on the presidential elections, it's very easy to see that the Georgescu vote is not suspiciously concentrated. It's not just young people or just old people. It's not just Romanians or just diaspora people. It's not just in the cities but not the country. It's not just in one province but not the others. It's just spread out. He won tremendously, but again, across the country. So it just looks like an election. It doesn't look like any kind of foreign interference. There has been no specific evidence either of social media interference. So it doesn't seem obvious that there's any basis for any action against the electoral process.
And what can be the consequences now of this decision? What comes next? You mentioned that there is not a clear-cut solution in the constitution for this scenario. What is now happening here? But what could be the outcome or the direction the events could take in the short run? And how have key international partners of Romania, EU institutions, other EU member states, the US, or even the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe reacted to these developments? We could confidently say that this is not a typical celebration of democracy, what is happening in Romania.
Yes, yes, indeed. This has been very strange. So to start with, I think the first institution to really react to this was the State Department in the United States, both on December 4, when the Romanian deep state acted, and on December 6, when the Constitutional Court acted in Romania. There were immediately statements from a press spokesperson for the State Department in America, and something very weird started happening. On the one hand, these declarations are saying, look, Romania has to have Romanian elections, no foreign interference, no malign foreign stuff. It's up for the Romanian people to decide. But on the other hand, they're also saying, but the court decisions, we are taking note of them. They're trying to protect the elections from interference. So they're not willing to say, yes, we have to cancel elections, yes, we have to suspend the democratic process, but they're also on the other hand, wanting to offer support for what the institutions are doing in Bucharest. It's a very vague situation. And this has been echoed in the EU, first of all, by Ursula von der Leyen, who went on X to say that she had a call with the outgoing Romanian president, who declared that he's not outgoing. And she's very satisfied that the problem of misinformation and the application of the EU legislation, the Digital Services Act, all is coming along well, and that the Romanian people are going to choose. But in fact, the choice of the Romanian people has been annulled by a court, and she will not speak to that, either for or against. And so there seems to be a support from European and American institutions for what is happening with the institutions in Bucharest, but not explicit support for cancelling or annulling an election, not making a substantive decision. Was this a coup by Russia, or is this a coup by Romanian institution? So no strong language, no strong positions staked out. And this has been echoed by, say, the European Socialist Party that is connected to some of the Romanian parties from the EU Parliament. This has been echoed also by the Polish foreign minister. This has been echoed by the Italian foreign minister. Italy is now president of the G7, so this carries quite a bit of weight. They're all saying it's good that the Constitutional Court is trying to safeguard elections, but they're not willing to say it's necessary to cancel the democracy. And so there is outspoken, but also very vague international support. It's very important people speaking, foreign ministers, for example, but they tend to do it in this very informal way on social media, on Facebook or X. It's a very vague, very unprecedented behavior, strange way to conduct foreign policy, to say the least. Meanwhile, the Romanian right-wing blocs have reacted by creating a petition online addressed to the Venice Commission, which is supposed to protect democracy, with a special remit, of course, for the countries of the former Iron Curtain. And this has already accumulated more than 1 million votes. That means more than half the Georgescu electorate, more than 10 or 11% of the national electorate. This also, I believe, is unprecedented. And it seems to be the first step in a kind of populist rally against this institutional behavior.
And based on what we know today about this whole thing, what do you think? Who could benefit from what is happening politically?
So far, it looks like this will redound to the benefit of the major parties that form the government. This would be the Social Democrats and the Liberals. They've been the government until now. They took a beating in the legislative elections, but they're still on top. They took a bad beating in the presidential elections, so much so that both party leaders, one the sitting prime minister, and the other one, the outgoing, the previous prime minister, the Misters Ciolacu and Ciucă, both resigned as party leaders of the great national parties of the post-89 era. And it seems like it's redounding to their benefits. But of course, it is not possible to speculate as yet what will the electorate do when they are actually called to vote again, because it's perfectly possible that they will wipe out these parties and bring the nationalists to power, as seemed to be happening in November and December.
Now, turning to the legislative election, could you please briefly present to our audience the key political parties that competed in the election, including the governing and opposition powers, and going a bit further, what the key cleavages are in the Romanian party system that separate these political parties, and how is the political competition structured these days in Romania?
Yes, so Romania has a bicameral legislature. There is a Chamber of Deputies and there is a Senate, and that means 330 people in the one and 130 or so in the other. And there have been campaigns by national referendum to limit the parliament to much lower numbers, but obviously the parties oppose them, the parliamentaries oppose them, and so the popular will is not going to be obeyed anytime soon in this regard. Now, the government up until the November elections was led by the Social Democrats. The Social Democrat Party is the major party of Romanian politics after 1989. They were especially the party that governed Romania during the period of accession to the EU at the beginning of the 2000s. But for most of the period, they were in government. It's they win more elections than they lose. So even now, they did better than anybody else. They won about 22% of the vote, and of course, then there is a redistribution of the votes once it is decided which parties make it into the parliament, and so they're at 26 and 27 in the chamber and Senate. They will be leading the next government as they have led the previous government. This is not such a shock. As I said, they're the major party, and their minor partner, the Liberals. These are the major parties of the last 35 years, really. Other parties have come and gone, and more recently it has become even more difficult to form new parties that have any kind of electoral success, but these ones are staying. What is so interesting is that they took a massive beating in these upcoming elections, and so the Social Democrats, they lost 24 seats from 2020 to 24. The Liberals lost 44. And so they are no longer capable of forming a majority. They will need help, a kind of grand coalition from two other parties, presumably. One of them is, again, a traditional party, the Magyar Party in Romania, which is sitting at a comfortable 21, 22 seats in the Chamber of Deputies and 10 in the Senate. This was a good result for them, but it's sort of typical. So now they have 22, but 4 years ago they had 21. No great variation. Everything else changed in Romanian politics, not this. And everything else means primarily a block of insurgent nationalist parties. The major one is called AUR, which is Romanian for gold. It's an acronym that stands for the Alliance for the Union of the Romanians. And there are two others, a youth party and the party of another right-wing nationalist figure. Șoșoacă is her name. And these three parties leapt up to 115 seats in the Chamber of Deputies from 33. So everything that was lost by the Social Democrats, by the Liberals, but also by another progressive center-left party called USR, all those losses went to the gains of the right. This is a shock. There has not been such a shift to the right in Romanian politics before, but of course it does fit in a much broader European context that starts with a new party being created in England on the right, Reform, actually entering parliament this year. There is the Rassemblement National in France that is now about a third of the electorate in the legislature. As also these nationalist parties are in Romania. The right wing took power in Austria outright, the Freedom Party, another amazing spectacle. Never in Austrian history had this happened, but the historic parties were simply evicted from power. And so also the right wing, or better to say perhaps populist nationalist parties in Czechia, especially the party of Viktor Babiš, they won elections this year, and they will win probably next year and return to power. And so this is an ongoing transformation. Even, of course, in Germany, the Alternative für Deutschland, AfD party that seems to be dominating the eastern states of the Federal Republic, are going to do very well and amount to maybe a third of the legislature in next year's elections. This is a wave. It's a wave of populism. It's a wave of Trump imitators in many cases, including in Romania. It's a wave of politicians appealing to the youth, especially perhaps to young men, especially through social media. It's a broad phenomenon, and although it is a shock to all of us that this happened, it's also, in fact, very easy to explain. It's more a case of we didn't know it could happen to us as well. And so Romanian politics is being transformed overnight, but it actually means becoming more of a part of the great political transformation of Europe. It's just that we used to think European integration means the European Union or NATO or maybe trade agreements or maybe like now with the help of Hungary, Romania is part of Schengen, or will become part at the 1st of January 2025. That's what we're used to. We're not used to populist, shocking political changes. This is entirely new. The notion of creating new parties, never mind parties that can amount to a third of the legislature, unprecedented. I keep using that word because I would like to stress that this is really what's going on. These are the facts, but since the facts are new to us, it's very, very hard to acknowledge them, so to speak. And so I've tried to show, on the one hand, what is going on, and on the other hand, how it makes Romania fit better, not less well, into the European political movement of our times. Maybe I should have said at the beginning, I guess I can say it now. Also, Romanians vote for the legislature on party lists, closed party lists, proportional representation. There is a 5% threshold to enter the parliament, and so the votes of parties that do not make the threshold are redistributed, which is why all of the parties did somewhat better after redistribution than they did in their initial votes. And that's how does one put it? It's a fairly good way, the threshold, to create a small parliament, a parliament of a few parties, so that it's possible to have coalitions. But also, since there are closed lists, that means that the party has quite a bit of control over who runs in what position, and that should also help stable coalitions, but in reality it does not work. Maybe it's a stopgap measure, maybe it's better with than without it. That's somewhat harder to say, but Romanian parties and coalitions are notoriously unstable. It's hard to get through 4 years with the same government, and so I don't think that the results of this election will change that pattern.
We will return to this latter thought. And taking a step back, what was this election campaign like? What were the key campaign topics? What positions did parties take on them? And in generally speaking, what was the true stake of this election from the point of view of the political powers competing, from the point of view of the voters, the Romanian voters?
So it's a strange thing to say, because it seems like from one very important point of view, we didn't really have a campaign, and that's because this party that represents the nationalist right wasn't particularly successful as a campaign vehicle in media appearances or in shaping public discourse. And on the other hand, the presidential candidate, who is also part of the nationalist right, didn't really get a lot of media. He was largely excluded from most but not all debates. Also, the polling didn't really pick up his support, and so there was a complete failure of instruments of political communications, of political measurements, the things that make elite institutions so successful. They failed. But that also means we didn't exactly have a campaign. That's unusual. But you can still see, because of this opposition between the nationalists and Călin Georgescu on the one hand, and the major parties of the transitional period or post-89 period on the other hand, you can see the opposition. The general tendency of Romanian politics is what we call internationally neoliberalism. And so the Social Democrat Party, for example, in its platform, campaigned on the principles of the market economy, on the importance of private property, on the rationalization of management of state assets, again in comparison with private enterprise. And that is what we mean by neoliberalism. They still talk about the market society on the social market model, the free market economy, but the social market model of Germany or of Central Europe, perhaps hearkening to the Social Democrat, Christian Democrat days. But the primary move is towards this neoliberalism model. And that, of course, also means getting along from every institutional point of view, from the EU to economic arrangements with the West. That's what the Social Democrats now stand for. The liberals, compared to that, only add a few right-wing free market tones, such as trying to privatize more public assets, if possible, things of that nature. And they have perhaps more of a stress on the European character of Romanian elites by suggesting in their campaign manifesto that international agreements must be followed by Romanian politics, especially by this liberal party. And of course, they add that the policies of the EPP as a European party will play a part in informing their own political conduct. It's strange. I think it shows what politics can do to become, as we say, out of touch. This is a nationalist moment everywhere in Europe, and these people are declaring obedience to the EU, to Brussels of all things. It's unusual, and no wonder they lost 44 seats. Let me just say that. So the oddity here is that this also seems to be a backward way, a discreet way of saying that maybe they want gay marriage. Romania is one of the countries in Eastern Europe where the vast majority of the population is decidedly against gay marriage, against anything like trans issues, and anything that can broadly be called woke, that's sweeping, say, through the French state or through the British state and media. And so for the parties that are sort of progressive, sort of left progressive, they have to find discrete ways of saying that, and saying that they'll be obeying European parties, European movements, and so on is a way to do that. And this same problem on the social side, we see with the center-left progressive party USR. They're declaring their adhesion in their party platform to the European Court of Human Rights, to the European Declaration of Human Rights. And that is notoriously a vehicle for imposing gay marriage on Eastern European countries that are more Christian, more patriotic, less globalist, less pro-gay marriage. And but again, it shows you that these people somehow realize that they owe their success to the EU, but they owe their votes to Romanians, and so they have to hedge. They can't say outright what they want. And this seems to also be a very weak position to be in. And if you compare this on the social issues and the economic issues, the nationalists are a ringing contrast. To start with the social issues, in a way, sort of like in Poland and in Hungary, our nationalist party is very pro-natalist. They're promising everything from public transport gratuities to tax privileges for families with children. I should also add Romania, perhaps even more than other countries in Eastern Europe, but perhaps comparable, doesn't really have a lot of divorce. And so you're not paying single mothers, you're paying families. It's this is how the social side of our manifesto begins. They're talking about God and the family and the proper organization of society. And so they also say you have to, on the one hand, give medical support, social support to mothers to help natality, but also try to help the kids. From gifted students, they should have special programs in schools to just every kid. They should be involved in summer camps. They should be involved in organizations for youth. They should have the opportunities for sports and athleticism, but also other kinds of associations to develop their gifts. This is not the language of Romanian politics normally, and so these nationalists really stand out. And also, they are, of course, against gay marriage. They are against trans issues. They're explicitly saying that biology has to be respected and acknowledged. They're also against abortion, but like Trump in America, they don't want to ban abortion. They're trying to offer help, they're saying, to pregnant women and to families in need to prevent it from happening without a legal sanction. So that's a much more expansive social policy than Romania has ever had, but it's also much more expansionist, pro-natalist, and pro-religion political rhetoric than Romania has had. And then on the economic side, completely against the neoliberalist trend, the nationalists are talking about nationalizing industries, or rather enterprises. Especially, there are suspicions that the major Romanian oil and gas company, Petrom, which was nationalized recently, was a suspicious, corrupt deal, and it has to be reviewed and maybe reversed. But more broadly, they want a European level success in Romania on the energy issue. They want cheaper energy. They want new sources of energy, especially hydro and especially nuclear. And also, they're talking in their platform about getting new resources of gas and oil. Romania historically had some gas and oil in the 20th century, quite successful. And maybe there's more that could be exploited, and it should be done with a view to the national good rather than with a view to foreign interests. That's basically the rhetoric of our party. And perhaps on the back of this sort of attempt to improve the energy profile of the country, they're making remarkable promises, or perhaps demands of the state, that that economic changes should happen for a healthier, more natural, more competitive, higher value added agriculture sector and tourism, but also IT sector. Romania has a very good IT sector. Lots of kids go to math on the German Realschule model. So math and computer science is the dominant feature for successful students. And therefore, especially American, but also other European corporations have recruited and have had very important local quarters in Romania. And up until recently, the Romanian state, in fact, offered a tax incentive, a lower income tax to people who work in IT. This was destroyed recently, and there's been a bit of a scandal about it, and it might be restored because it's one of the important tech sectors and industrial sectors, and therefore a good tax basis for the state as well. And so there's a project with the nationalists to revitalize the various industries of the country and revitalize the economy while also making it a lot more nationalistic. They want, paradoxically, to be both very competitive and to some extent protective. So they want a lot more state interference, but they want also a lot more success as benchmarked by international standards of competition, export, all of these things that are part, after all, of international, if not global, capitalism. So it's not at all clear that they are competent in government. It would be the first time they make it into government if they should succeed, but they are ambitious in a way Romanian politics has not really seen, and it's not hard therefore to explain their success.
Another important and interesting aspect could be the turnout in this election, which was 16 percentage point higher than 4 years ago, but still it remained under 50%, standing at something like 48%. What do you think, which is quite low in international comparison, even in the region? What do you think? Why are Romanian voters so apathic? Is there any structural reason for or explanation for that, or this is just normal state of Romanian politics? This level of interest from the side of voters.
Yeah, this is true. Romanian turnout in legislative elections is notoriously low, and it was abysmally low 4 years ago. We could say the low point. Partly, of course, that was explained, I guess, by COVID 2020. But also kind of disappointment. Romanians are disappointed more than apathetic. They are maybe a bit bitter and even contemptuous of parties. It's impossible in Romania to respect politicians or political parties. And so there are two major structural flaws in the constitutional design with a view to elections. First of all, Romanians believe in the president because they're basically nationalists, and that's a national representative. It is not a creature of partisan negotiations behind scenes in a parliament that nobody really understands. It's elected upfront, publicly, decisively by the nation. And so there's always higher turnout. But constitutionally, the president is, though not a figurehead, quite weak. The country is actually run by a prime minister. It's actually run from the parliament, if not from the deep state. So it's much more indirect. Now, this means that every 5 years nowadays, or it used to be 4 years for a presidential term, we all go out there and vote in the hope of saving the country from corruption, that means usually the Social Democrat Party, but which should be said has also been responsible for a lot of economic growth, for a lot of international success in the EU. And so this is what the Romanian project is, and therefore I can speak as we, time after time for 20 years we defeat the Social Democrat candidate in presidential elections. But you can't achieve anything beyond that, because you can vote for a president, but he cannot create the government, much less run it. And so the constitutional design or intellectual elites, you could say, might want Romanians to vote for the legislature, but the Romanians want to vote for the president, and nobody can force them. And so now there's a difference, partly because it was an electoral shock, partly simply because the organizers of the elections, the Social Democrats, made the deadly mistake of placing the legislative elections between the two rounds of balloting for the presidency, which is also only possible once every 20 years. So it's the first time it happens in my adult life. The 2004, now 2024, bam, all simultaneous elections for the major powers. But this also meant that nobody could quite predict what was going to happen. As best I understand the calculus, since the legislative elections were on Independence Day, December 1, the Romanian celebration of unity after 1918, it either meant that people are going to vote the Social Democrat Liberal Alliance, or on the other hand, stay home and party. And either way, you either win or you don't lose. But that's because none of them predicted an insurgency of the nationalist parties and of a candidate completely unknown to the political system as to the population, Călin Georgescu. And so they were routed where they had expected a comfortable victory with or without participation. And I think that shows you, turnout is always going to be low. People don't believe in the legislature. They don't believe in the parties. They're sick in a way of corruption and of a labyrinth in administration, but they believe in the presidency. And so there's a structural mismatch between popular ideas of representation and the constitutional design that, since it is so important to the parties themselves, is not really going to change anytime soon. It doesn't look like the system is ever going to improve.
I think we should talk a few words about the prospects of new government. And according to official party communications over the past 2 weeks, the Social Democrats, the Liberals, USR, and the Hungarian Minorities Party are likely to collaborate somehow and form a coalition in the foreseeable future. Is this indeed the most likely scenario in your opinion? And as you already mentioned, Romania does not have the brightest track record of government stability over the past 30 years. What are the chances, or what would be the chances for survival of such a coalition of these four parties?
Yeah, I think it's hard to believe that whatever government will be formed now by a much weaker Social Democrat Party is going to last 4 years. But it seems like over the short term, they do need to make sure that the Social Democrats and the Liberals, together with maybe both the USR, Central Left Progressives, and the Magyar Representative Party, are going to have a great coalition against the nationalist insurgency. And of course, that means they have to find somewhere new party leaders, since the Social Democrat and Liberal Party leaders have resigned, and a new presidential candidate, and for potential elections for the presidency in March. And so most of the important things are now unknown. It's actually shocking that all the parties are there, but if you ask yourself who will lead them and who is supposed to be president, they think, we have no idea. Again, one last time, I guess I could say it's unprecedented. So I don't have any speculations to offer on the next year's government or elections, but it doesn't look very stable or predictable.
One day, if we will have a properly elected president in Romania, along with a properly appointed government, prime minister and government, what could be the first policy issues on the new cabinet's agenda? What challenges will it face in the short run, supposing that this scenario will happen in a couple of months?
Well, it seems like the urgent pressing issues are, of course, the issues caused by COVID and then the Ukraine war. Energy prices are abnormally high. Inflation is still a problem. It doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon. There are threats to economic growth, although Romania is quite an impressive economy, at least because it started from a worse position. It has outperformed the EU average for a long time now, and in recent years it has also been seen as a good investment opportunity for capital from Central Europe, Western Europe, even America to some extent. And so it seems like tackling these sorts of issues, energy and inflation, that's the urgent stuff. And looking forward to some kind of rearrangement of the social issue. This is 35 years after 89. It's a new generation that's coming to power, that's considering everything from how to raise a family to how to plan for a retirement. And so there will have to be all sorts of changes to social services, to medical services. In fact, there might be a need to simply reassess most of the state's, the public services, most of the public spending, because Romania has fairly good demographics, significantly better than other countries, but it is facing, partly on the basis of this prosperity, all sorts of questions that will become national questions, like importing foreigners from Asia who work for cheaper wages. Is that useful because it keeps the economy humming, or is it bad because it lowers the wages of Romanians or creates social conflicts? All of these things will have to be deliberated and upon and decided, it looks like, in 2025.
And my final question would be somehow connected to the Hungarian minorities and their fate in Romania. Their party, UDMR, will likely, as we already mentioned, part of the new government. How will the next years look like for ethnic Hungarians in Romania? What are their prospects? Will they see their situation improving? What does this situation offer to them now? And if we expand this whole Hungarian issue, how could develop the bilateral relations between a prospective government, including UDMR, and the Orban government here in Hungary?
Yeah, it seems like the UDMR, the Magyar party, has done okay in the elections, and when every other party has done much worse, they're actually looking great, and so they're going to be in government. They were tacitly supporting government before, as are also the representatives of other ethnic minorities, but they weren't part of it. Now it seems like they might be able to make some demands for a ministry, maybe do a little better politically. And but as you said, a lot also depends on the relationships with the Orban government. And so far, it seems like Hungary has been instrumental, maybe decisive, in helping Romania enter Schengen, which again will be useful for Romanian-Magyar commercial relations across the border, but also for Romanian commerce in Europe more broadly, and even make travel less of a hassle. And so that looks to improve things. Probably there are a few issues that will have to be decided concerning administration in the parts, especially of Transylvania, where there are lots of Magyars. In some places they are the majority, and so there are questions about administration, about education, languages, about the language of public administration, bureaucracy, documents, etc. And these things have to be in various ways arranged, but they seem like they will not be a problem, partly because the part of the neoliberalism platform of the government is a certain degree of administrative decentralization, allowing decisions to be made at a more local level, and therefore letting the people affected deal with it to their satisfaction. So it looks like Magyars are part of the great success of Romania in recent years. They're part of the worries since the COVID years concerning the economy and the competence of the state. And so they will do about as well or as badly as the rest of the country, depending on how the government negotiates these problems that, of course, they're global problems, inflation, etc.
Thank you very much, Titus, for sharing your thoughts about the most recent Romanian elections. We've been delivered a truly detailed insight into contemporary Romanian politics. And dear listeners, thank you for being with us. In the past 40 minutes, you had the chance to listen to Mr. Titus Tehera. Thank you for being with us today, and please stay tuned for the upcoming episodes. Goodbye.